Hi, this is Rick Julian, author of The Way. This is commentary on verse 8. I am water feeding everything without trying. Again, we return to this theme of doing without doing, just being. There's a certain sort of perfection in simply being that makes doing unnecessary. You see this more often among old people, especially old and wise people, that you enter into their presence and they don't have to do anything to nourish you. Just their presence, their energy is nourishment all by itself. Before they even begin to say something to you, they can just look at you with a sense of knowing, a sense of understanding, and the accumulation of all their life experiences are all converged in their spirit, and it feeds you just being there before anything happens. And I think that the Tao has that similar essence about it, that it just does what it does by being what it is without any effort at all. The next lines, I seek the low places people fear and cleanse everything. This speaks to humility. We are often reluctant to take the lowest place, feeling that if we don't put ourselves at the front of the line, putting ourselves in the most visible position, that we won't be effective, we won't get our credit, we won't get the attention that we crave or feel we deserve. But you will witness when you're in business meetings or in larger group conversations that there's a certain dynamic that happens. There's often an alpha personality who wants to lead the discussion and who is very active in stating opinions and trying to be the most visible and loudest voice in the conversation. And by assuming that position, they think that they're going to get the attention and have the kind of influence that they are seeking. But more often than not, I've observed that there's another person who just sits and listens attentively, and then at the right moment says the perfect thing at the perfect time and changes the course of the direction altogether. Because that person has sought the low place, that humble place of the observer, of the listener, of one who wants to take in as much information as possible before sharing an opinion that is well considered and thoughtful. So that's the low place in that context. Water, we know, also does, in reality as we observe it in nature, always finds the low place. And it is the best solvent in the world. Water can clean a lot of stuff. You don't need to go out to the store and buy expensive detergents and cleaners to handle most tasks. Water will handle most of it. So its humility is this free, the most abundant, one of the most abundant things in the world is water. Utterly free. Yet it is so powerful. Its softness, as we'll talk about in a later verse, it is one of the softest substances in the world. It isn't hard. But again, in that softness is its power. You can go to the Grand Canyon and see what the softest thing in the world can do to some of the hardest rock in the world. I remember going there not long ago with my son and sitting next to the Colorado River and looking at some of the oldest bedrock that scientists have ever discovered. called a gneiss, Gneiss, I believe. And it is extremely hard. And when you look up, you have this moment of awareness that this hard, hard thing was carved out by this very soft substance, this humble substance with all of its power. And it has that ability to not only cut through, but also cleanse the canyon. It washes away the debris. It washes away all the detritus that accumulates and returns the place that it affects back to a clear space. Water is extremely, extremely powerful. The next verses are interesting, highly subject to interpretation. The lines go, live naturally, sleep near the ground, think simply, in conflict be just, lead others without your will, enjoy your work, be fully present with your family. Live naturally. It's interesting that in our culture, we seem to be having a return to this ethic of living more naturally, of eating more organic foods and buying clothes that have more natural fibers. We've kind of gone around the block on that, haven't we? Yes, we have a lot of performance fabrics, for example, in athletic wear. But few things are as versatile and healthy and breathe as well and perform as well as just regular cotton, the most natural and basic of fibers that humans have been using for thousands of years. There's something to be said about this return to our natural instincts, and it is supported by these verses. Sleep near the ground. When the Tao Te Ching was first written, I doubt there weren't a lot of 60-story condominiums where people were sleeping high above ground. But I would guess that there were structures that were elevated on stilts or other places that would make you a bit more vulnerable if the support of your home were to fall. So that there's something to be said about being close to the ground. There's also an energy that one experiences when one sleeps near the ground or directly on the ground. Having done a lot of camping in my life, I can say that there's comfort aside, there's a very distinct energetic difference when you sleep on the ground than when you sleep, on the cushy mattresses that we have in our homes. There's also the firmness of it is good and healthy for us. It's good for our spines. And I think that sometimes we're finding that being in things that are too cushioned and further away from the ground in that respect are less healthy for us. Think simply. Well, the less that is said, the better. I struggle with that myself. I tend to be too verbose, and I am trying to do a better job. It's a lifelong struggle to become more simple in my thinking. As a writer, this book, The Way, was one of the most complicated things I've ever done because it required me to work so simply and so elementally in communicating some very profound ideas. A writer said, here's the column that you asked me to write. It would be twice as good if it were half as long, but he had to turn it in on deadline. So you get what you get. That speaks to the quality of thinking simply and communicating simply. In the process of writing, I've continually remind myself that the art is more in what we subtract from what we write and what we think, and less in what we add to it. Simplicity. Saying as much as you can with as much economy of language as it can be said. In conflict, be just. I am on social media a good amount, and I observe that too often I think that we seek to win arguments rather than win understanding of the other person's perspective. In our desire to win sometimes at all cost, that's not justice, yeah? That's satisfying our ego. And I do think that if we sought understanding and sought justice, if we went into debates and conflicts saying, I want to emerge from this with a fair outcome that may require that I make some concessions on my side. It may require that I open myself up to changing my position, changing my opinion. But my goal is to arrive at a just outcome, not just an outcome in which I win. Lead others without your will. Again, I think this is this idea that we can take a low place. Leading by example is one of the most powerful ways to lead. I've been in a lot of circumstances where the most effective leader was not the most vocal leader. It was the person who best exhibited the kinds of traits that everyone else wanted to have in their own personal practice. A singer who always came prepared, who always had rehearsed their parts, who had practiced and knew not only their parts, but sometimes other people's parts, set a wonderful example in many of the choirs that I was in. I admired that level of preparation, and I admired that level of preparation allowed this person to perform with far less anxiety than you would experience yourself if you came in unprepared and unrehearsed. So they were always more relaxed and confident because they had prepared themselves. By doing that, they didn't have to look and tell anyone what to do. They just had to be themselves, and their competence and the skill that they demonstrated made them someone that other people wanted to watch and listen to and emulate. Lead others without your will. Enjoy your work. Not enough can be said about this. I think that too often we think about what can I make the most money at? And sometimes we make choices about our careers that are less about involving ourselves in work that we will enjoy and look forward to doing, and more about the one that maximizes the income that we can get. And what that ultimately leads to can be years and years of dissatisfaction and unhappiness. If you only work 8 hours a day, and most people work more, a third of your day is invested in that work. And if you're not enjoying it, you're wasting a third of your day. And that doesn't even count the hours spent anticipating it before you arrive at work, and all of the thinking and fretting and stress that happens after work. So I could imagine that we probably invest half or more of our lives, of our mental energy is invested in our work, and the quality of our lives when we actually enjoy it greatly enhanced. So choose the work that gives you most meaning, that brings you the most satisfaction. And more often than not, if you are really, really good at what you do, because you work hard and because you continue to grow your talent and skill at that job, the income tends to take care of itself. I've certainly observed that for myself. I've observed that with other people who have had jobs that I would never, ever have imagined someone could make a lot of money at. They were able to do it and make a lot of money because they just did what they loved. And people really enjoy watching people do something extremely well. And people who have high value, high skill are in high demand. If you're really, really good at what you do, you can kind of write your ticket for the rest of your life, because most people actually aren't that good at what they do. I would say less than 10% of all people at any given skill position are really good at it. So that the people who are in that top 10% are highly, highly valued. And one of the reasons why they become so good is not necessarily because they have some natural innate talent, but more often it's that they enjoyed what they did and they just did it so much that they got good. And because they enjoyed it, they did it more and they thought about it more and they practiced it more because it was enjoyable to them. And I think that's the best of all worlds, when you find something that you enjoy and you become highly skilled as a result of that enjoyment, and then you become highly rewarded because of that high level of skill. Be fully present with your family. Boy, I have to remind myself about this all the time. I think for a lot of us, this is a struggle. How often are we spending time with our faces, our eyes glued to our phones, to our laptops, to the screens, whatever kind of screen? It's become epidemic, and you'll see even kids gathered together in parks, and all of them, there may be 5 or 6 of them together, but they're not looking at one another. They're not talking to one another. They actually have their eyes glued to their screens. And that is practicing a behavior that will extend into their relationships as they get older. So I think that it's incumbent on us to observe ourselves and to set the phones down, to close the laptops, to turn off the screens, observing ourselves, and when we catch ourselves being distracted, interrupt that distraction and return our attention to be present with our family. It's one of the greatest gifts in our lives, and I truly believe that when my children look back on their childhood, that the time that we spent in each other's company will be some of the richest and most meaningful memories that they will have. And I'm sure that the same will be true for you and your family if you practice this level of presence. The wise one does not compare or compete. Is what I have better than what he has? What I have is inferior, then I feel bad about what I have. If I have a nice car, but this other person has a nicer car, I feel bad. I have a wonderful car. It gets me everywhere I need it to go. Why should I feel bad about my car because someone has one that's more expensive? If, on the other hand, we compare and we feel that our possession is better than someone's, then we have put ourselves in this superior position. And that's not good. Accept things as they are. Everything is unique. Everything is unique. And I think the wiser we become, the older we become, the more we recognize that. It's a good awareness to have. It's a good thing to begin practicing earlier in your life, and you'll save yourself a lot of dissatisfaction. You'll save yourself a lot of disappointment if you just value and appreciate what you have. And I think the more that I practice my gratitude for what I have, the more I realize that I don't need to compare or compete, because what I have is sufficient to my needs. I do not compete or compare. And when I do that, And it is a hard thing to always practice for me. But when I do that, I'm in my best place. He is respected most because he is most himself. Boy, this verse is just full of powerful lines that really one could meditate on for the rest of one's life. When we look into the world, let's look at the world of art. My favorite artists are the ones that have the most unique perspectives, whose work is a bright, shiny object in an otherwise sea of similarity. I think that in business, I often talk to my clients that we want to have a singular presence that represents the uniqueness that is authentic to a company. Every company is unique. Its brand is unique. Its people are unique. Its history is unique. And so the best thing that we can do is to manifest our uniqueness as a brand and communicate that. Apple was a brilliant example of this. Steve Jobs' brand for Apple was singular among all computer brands because he was most himself and Apple was most itself. In neuroscience, there's a theory called the heuristic of distinctiveness. That's a kind of a fancy word, fancy concept for saying the shiny object gets the most attention. And the shiny object gets the most attention because other things aren't shining around it. So when you are in the fullness of your own uniqueness, you become that shiny object. And within displays of your character, within the displays of your business practices, within the displays, just how you handle yourself in the world, be the person who does the things that others are often afraid to do. Be the person who defends someone who needs defense even when it is uncomfortable or unpopular to take that position. And you will be far, far more respected for taking that stance than you will for the crowd who kind of cowers in silence because they wanted to blend in with everyone else and not say anything. He is respected most because he is most himself. He is unique among men. She is unique among women because she is the fullness of who she is. The fullness of the expression of her unique and authentic self is the most beautiful expression and will gain her the most respect. That's the end of the 8th commentary.